Hi there, welcome back, or welcome for the very first time. You're safe now. This is your time to rest. Let go of your day. Let your breath slow down and your thoughts float gently away. Tonight I'll be reading you a fairy tale, an old story wrapped in moonlight and carried on a quiet breeze just for you. So snuggle in, get cozy, and let the soft rhythm of the story guide you into dreams. Let's begin. The Crag y Dawn Blacksmith. Once upon a time, an old blacksmith lived in a forge at Crag y Dawn, and he used to drink a great deal too much beer. One night, he was coming home from an alehouse very tipsy, and as he got near a small stream, a lot of little men suddenly sprang up from the rocks, and one of them, who seemed to be older than the rest, came up to him and said, "If you don't alter your way of living, you'll die soon. But if you behave better and become a better man, you'll find it will be to your benefit." And then they all disappeared as quickly as they had come. The old blacksmith thought a good deal about what the fairies had told him, and he left off drinking and became a sober, steady man. One day, a few months after meeting the little people, a strange man brought a horse to be shod. Nobody knew the horse or the man. The old blacksmith tied the horse to a hole in the lip of a cauldron used for the purpose of cooling his hot iron that he had built in some masonry. When he had tied the horse up, he went to shoe the off hind leg, but directly he touched the horse, and the spirited animal started back with a bound and dragged the cauldron from the masonry. Then it broke the halter and ran away out of the forge, and was never seen again, neither the horse nor its master. When the old blacksmith came to pull out the masonry to rebuild it, he found 3 brass kettles full of money. The end. Old Gwilym. Old Gwilym Evans started off one fine morning to walk across the Eagle Hills to a distant town, bent upon buying some cheese. On his way, in a lonely part of the hills, he found a golden guinea, which he quickly put into his pocket. When he got to the town, instead of buying his provisions, he went into an alehouse and sat drinking and singing with some sweet-voiced quarrymen until dark, when he thought it was time to go home. Whilst he was drinking, an old woman with a basket came in and sat beside him, but she left before him. After the parting glass, he got up and reeled through the town, quite forgetting to buy his cheese. And as he got amongst the hills, they seemed to dance up and down before him, and he seemed to be walking on the air. When he got near the lonely spot where he had found the money, he heard some sweet music, and a number of fairies crossed his path and began dancing all around him. And when he looked up, he saw some brightly lighted houses before him on the hill, and he scratched his head, for he never remembered having seen houses thereabouts before. As he was thinking and watching the fairies, one came and begged him to come into the house and have a sit down. So he followed her in and found the house was all gold inside it and brightly lighted, and the fairies were dancing and singing, and they brought him anything he wanted for supper. Then they put him to bed. Gwilym slept heavily, and when he awoke, turned round, for he felt very cold, and his body seemed covered with prickles. So he sat up and rubbed his eyes, and found that he was quite naked and lying in a bunch of gorse. When he found himself in this plight, he hurried home and told his wife. She was very angry with him for spending all the money and bringing no cheese home, and then he told her of his adventures. "Oh, you bad man," she said, "the fairies gave you money and you spent it wrongly, so they were sure to take their revenge." The baby farmer. Old Caddy was a baby farmer, and one day she went to the woods to gather sticks for her fire, and whilst she was gathering the sticks, she found a piece of gold and took it home, but she never told anyone she had found money, for she always pretended to be very poor. But though she was so poor, she used to dress 2 of her children in fine clothes, but the others whom she did not like she kept in the filthiest of rags. One day a man knocked at her door and asked to see the children. He sat down in her little room, and she went and brought the ragged little girl and boy, saying she was very poor and couldn't afford to dress them better, for she had been careful to hide the well-dressed boy and girl in a cockloft. After the stranger had gone, she went to the cockloft to look for her well-dressed favourites, but they had disappeared, and they were never seen again afterwards, for they were all turned into fairies. The Old Man and the Fairies. Many years ago, the Welsh mountains were full of fairies. People used to go by moonlight to see them dancing, for they knew they would see dance by seeing green rings in the grass. There was an old man living in those days who used to frequent the fairs that were held across the mountains. One day he was crossing the mountains to a fair, and he got to a lonely valley, so he sat down, for he was tired, and dropped off to sleep, and his bag fell down by his side. When he was sound asleep, the fairies came and carried him off, bag and all, and took him under the earth. And when he awoke, he found himself in a palace full of gold and full of fairies dancing and singing. And they took him and showed him everything, the splendid gold rooms and gardens, and they kept dancing around him until he fell asleep. When he was asleep, they carried him back to the same spot where they had found him, and when he awoke, he thought it had all been a dream, so he looked for his bag and got a hold of it, but he could hardly lift it. When he opened it, he found it was nearly filled with gold. He managed to pick it up, and turning around, he went home. But when he got home, his wife, Caddy, said, "What's to do? Why haven't you been to the fair?" "I've got something here," he said, and showed his wife the gold. "Why, where did you get that?" But he wouldn't tell her. Since she was so curious, like all women, she kept worrying him all night, for he'd put the money in a box under the bed. So he told her about the fairies. Next morning, when he awoke, he thought he'd go to the fair and buy a lot of things, and when he went to get the box to get some gold, he found it was full of cockle shells. The end. Tommy Pritchard. Tommy Pritchard was going to school one day, and on his way he thought he heard somebody singing on the other side of a stone wall by the road. So he climbed up and looked over, and underneath a stone he saw a sixpence, so he took it. Every morning after that, when he went to school, he used to look in the same place and always found a sixpence. His father noticed that he was always spending money in the sweet shop, so he began to think that Tommy was stealing from somebody, and one day he asked him where he got the money. Tommy wouldn't tell at first, but his father threatened to beat him, so he told him where he got his sixpences. The next morning he went to look in the same place for his sixpence and found nothing but a cockle shell, and he never saw anything but a cockle shell there afterwards. The end. Caddy's luck. There was a tall young woman whom the fairies used to visit, coming through the keyhole at night. She could hear them dancing and singing in her room, but in the morning they used to go the way they had come and only left her some money. So when she got married, she chose a tall husband like herself. They had a fine big child. One night they went to a fair and they got to one side to hear the fairies. For some people could tell when the fairies were coming, for they made a noise like the wind. Whilst they were waiting, she told her husband how the fairies used to leave her money at night. When they got home, they found their baby all right and went to bed. But the next morning, the young mother found her child had been changed in the night, and there was a very little baby in the cradle. The child never grew big, for the fairies had changed her child for spite. The end. The story has ended, but your dreams are just beginning. Let them carry you gently through stars and silence and soft wonder. Thank you for letting me read to you. I'll be here again whenever you need a quiet voice and a gentle tale. Sleep well, sleep deep, and good night, dear dreamer. Breuddwydion Melys, dear dreamer, sweet dreams.